Thanks for joining us. Today, the IS Lab brings you Marc Smith from the Social Media Research Foundation. He's going to be talking about NodeXL Pro and Power BI.
Indeed.
Hi, Mark. Pleasure to meet you.
Hi there. Is that Garrett?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Garrett. Where are you physically located?
Right here, but not in San Francisco. Currently in North Hollywood.
All right, right. Just full disclosure, I was a Bruin. I have 10 years at UCLA from 90 to 2000 doing a PhD in sociology in Haynes Hall. So go Bruins.
Awesome.
And I think, Mark, you are set up to be able to share whenever you're ready.
Very good. I'll share a screen here. Let's do this one. And let's see here. I'll just tidy things up a little bit and bring a piece of this over. Here we go. And hi, I'm Marc Smith. I'm a sociologist from UCLA. I got my degree in sociology from UCLA. And I work with an organization called the Social Media Research Foundation. And we are in Redwood City, California, about 400 miles north of you in the Bay Area. And our aspiration, this foundation, is to bring together the talents of a number of computer scientists, information scientists, social scientists, communications scholars, and even PR, communications, and marketing professionals to build a tool that makes it easier to understand networks, social networks, and social media networks for people who are not software developers. And so quick show of hands on the call. Any software developers on the line? I'll take that as a no.
Not me.
Yeah, me neither. So
Great.
The challenge is if you're not a software developer, it's really hard to do what I think of as the 5 things it is necessary to do in order to be a citizen of the network society. And those are get a network, put it somewhere, analyze it, visualize it, and write a report about it that tells another person why they should care. And so we're about the idea that networks matter, all kinds of networks, but certainly social networks, and in particular social media networks. And so it's worth spending a moment or two to just talk about, well, what is this thing network that we're talking about? And let me go grab some slides for that. I'm just going to jump to this, yeah. So this is a network. This is a completely fabricated network. There's a bunch of dots and they've got lines, and we just made it up. But each of the dots has numbers that we can calculate about it based on how many other dots connect to it and where those dots are. And so we could say, let a dot be redder and bigger based on how many lines touch it. And we'll call that degree. But we could also count something else, which is centrality, betweenness centrality. The how much would the network break apart if this dot was removed? And that is worth looking at again. So look at this one. This is how many lines you've got. And notice that O has a lot of lines there, and it's big, but O is small in this. How could that be? Why would O have less centrality but high degree? And that's a rhetorical question. The answer is, if O is removed, no one is disconnected, because all of O's connections are essentially redundant. There are other ways there. And so we want to help people think about networks so that they can start to understand their own position within their network in the same way that I think we all have moved into things like Google Maps and Bing Maps, those kinds of things. That was initially called the geographic information systems, and we now live inside of geographic information systems. We're talking about sociological information systems, tools that help you map similarly to Google Maps. Where am I? Where do I want to be? Where do I want to go? How do I get there? But instead of where you are physically, it would be where are you in your network? Who occupies a position in your network that you'd like to be in? And how do you move from your current position to that position in your network? So this is our network. We've got a bunch of people who have been working with the foundation in one way or the other over many years. And they tend to be computer scientists and social scientists and information scientists and the like. And there's Diana. There you are, Diana. And so we've come together to try to be able to study phenomena that might be like this, right? There are these hashtags and Facebook groups and discussion boards, and topics rise and fall, and it's this amorphous thing. And it would be nice to be able to actually get your arms around it and study it in some systematic way. And so we are trying to ask the question, how could we draw a hashtag? How would we represent these kinds of social media spaces? And the answer is that we're going to use networks, because all social media is a social network. And the reason networks are better than, let's say, social media reporting tools that tell you how many followers you have or how many messages there are or how many people replied to you is that it's not how many, it's how connected that really matters. So getting 1,000 people who don't talk to each other may not be better than getting 100 people who densely connect to one another. And so the number 10 is accurate. There are 10 dots. But network analysis says, I need to know how the dots are connected in order to gain more insight. And so just to make the point again, just because 2 boxes of Lego have the same number of bricks doesn't mean that they have the same thing inside them. And so X-Wings are not Minecraft. So what would it look like if we could draw a picture of a hashtag? And why should we draw a picture? Why can't we just do the big data thing and give you a bunch of metadata about the hashtag and be done with it? And the answer is because most of us are not supernumerate, right? The way I'll make that point is to say, please look at these numbers and identify the errors or the outliers, and then help me make this judgment. Of the 4 XY coordinate pair data sets, which are the most like one another and which are the most different from one another? And of course, the other thought is, well, what about statistics? Well, there are the statistics. The trick is all 4 distributions have identical statistics. And so, anybody got some insights? Any outliers, errors? No? Okay, so here's how you could get your brain to answer all those questions in less than 1 second. Here we go. Oh. So when we draw data, human brains that are not sort of supernumerate, and mine isn't, can see pattern in this kind of stuff in a millisecond. Actually, it takes about 300 milliseconds for your brain to go, oh, so less than a second. And then you get this kind of insight. And so could we draw a hashtag or a Facebook group or a bunch of wiki pages? Could we draw what it looks like when people email each other or text each other? What would that look like? And what would we be looking for in these visualizations? Well, maybe things like, what's the shape of the crowd, and who are the key people in the crowd, and are there clusters or subgroupings, and what are they talking about, and how does this group talk about things differently than these people, and what things are sort of spiky? What are these sort of big dynamic moments. And then of course, new for 2016, invasion and manipulation. In what way could we visualize what is normal so as to detect what is not normal? And so I am a sociologist, and we are the people who care about two or more people. Psychologists care about one or fewer of you, but sociologists care about two or more of you. And we care about what people do with one another. And so whenever a crowd forms, we're interested in that phenomena because we want to see the shape, the size, the divisions, the structure of that crowd. And indeed, when a crowd like this forms, this is Tahrir Square, if there are 750,000 people in Tahrir Square right now, well, that would be a bad thing for them to do. They should all be wearing masks and go home. But hey, it's a COVID world. But in the old days, crowds that gathered, that would be something that you would photograph. And the picture of the crowd would have a lot of meaning. And so what we want to do, is be able, oh, come on, there we go, is to say, well, what about crowds that are in the virtual world? What about when people don't gather in the physical world, and now they don't, or they shouldn't? What about when they gather in the virtual world? Could we draw a picture of that? Could you look at this stream of tweets and tell me what are the outliers, what are the errors, and what are the groupings, and which things are the most like each other? And of course, the answer might be, well, that will take a lot of time. I have to read a lot of messages. And that's a problem because there are a lot of messages. How many messages about American politics are going to be tweeted today? More than 10 million, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of messages. And how many messages can you, a human, read in an hour? If you can read 10 tweets in 1 minute, that means your top tweet consumption rate is 600 tweets per hour. And so machines have created a situation in which humans create more content than humans can consume. And that's actually turned out to be a problem because we need to have an eye on some of these conversations, big public conversations. We shouldn't just let them happen off stage. We should keep an eye on them. And so in what way could we get an overview of these public conversational spaces in, let's say, less than 300 milliseconds? We could visualize the pattern of connections among these people who in this case are talking about American politics, and see how they actually form separate clusters, subgroups, subcommunities, market segments. And if you look at the words at the top of the boxes, these would be the words used by the people in that box. And people are in the box not because of the words, but because of the connections. And so we start with connection. Who replies to who retweeted who mentioned who followed who friended who, all of the ways you reply, all these things form connections. And those connections are the lines. And the dots are the people who wrote the messages. And so networks let us see what are otherwise potentially very messy smears of interconnections. And if we do it right, we can actually visualize these structures and see that there are repeating shapes, like molecular patterns in the data. For example, these wagon wheel shapes, a circle with a hub, a circle with a hub, these circle with hubs pattern, we're going to see a lot of that. And so if we work at it, we can make visualizations of networks, of collections of connections, more visually legible, comprehensible. And if we work at it, we can even make tools that make making these things really easy. And if we make it easy, then you can think link. Then you can think about where you are in a network. We will have created a kind of sociological information system, a system that helps you see the pattern of connections in which you are embedded. And you are a node. We are all nodes in a network. And so it would be nice to know which node are you and which node did you want to be. And maybe that would allow you to navigate these networks more intentionally, more volitionally, rather than being just sort of subject and embedded in them. So this is not data, this is a cartoon, but this just represents the way in which just a bunch of dots and a bunch of lines can convey some nuance about the nature of different kinds of human institutions, different kinds of companies and their cultures. And I spent 10 years at Microsoft, so I think that's pretty accurate, except that the guns were much bigger. Apple, this is the Apple under Steve Jobs. Nobody was allowed to talk to anybody but Steve. Here in Oracle, the legal department is 10 times the size of the engineering department, and so on. So if just a bunch of dots and lines can perhaps be evocative, then our job is to make it easy for you to sort of grab pictures of these dots and lines from real world data sources. Or not, I mean, it could be fictional, but we want to make it easy to point a kind of camera into your favorite hashtag, your favorite Facebook group or YouTube channel, or where wiki page collection, whatever it may be, and to recognize that there is network everywhere, and maybe we can make it easier to just sort of like walk up to stuff and press a button and take a picture and get a network. And we can, and we did. We stuck a new menu into Excel. This is just Excel. And when you click on the NodeXL ribbon in Excel, you get a menu. And in order to get information out of, let's say, Twitter, you'd go to the NodeXL menu, you go to Data and Import, and come down the list until you found what you wanted. I'd get some Twitter data, and I'll get a dialog box, and I type my query here and hit OK, and I get this. Now, admittedly, not quite as fast as all that. It might take 8, 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on the size of the data set, size of the computer. There are other variables. But what you're seeing is people talking about ice cream. People are talking about Baskin-Robbins on Twitter. And this is what it looks like when a crowd of people talk about Baskin-Robbins. And I must say, it's very warm up here in Northern California. How is it down there? Did you get the heat wave? We were almost 100 degrees yesterday. So ice cream is not a bad idea. But what's the shape of that crowd? And if you're the brand manager, who are the leaders of talking about your product? And what are they talking about? And who are the most influential people? So we might want to be able to slice through that data and dig into it and find who are the mayors of that hashtag? What are the topics that define it? What are the URLs that they're linking to? And all of this happens in a very automated way. There is this dialogue, the automate dialogue, and it says, go do all this stuff in this order. Not that different from the way that when you point your iPhone at something and you press the button, the iPhone does at least half of the work, right? You picked what to take a picture of, but the iPhone picked how to take a picture of it. And yeah, you might put filters or whatever effects on it and you zoom, but it's doing focus, white balance, color adjustment. It's doing feature detection. It's the thing that puts the little bounding box around their faces. And so we were trying to do that for you as well. And so you get data. You get data about hashtags or wiki pages or YouTube videos or messages in an email discussion. And each row represents one connection from one person to another person in that data. Somebody replied to somebody, somebody mentioned somebody, and all that happened over time. And so we'll be interested in knowing, well, what happened at 5 p.m.? Why was that the peak moment? And what happened in that peak moment? So, and we'll also do a content analysis in which we'll do sentiment analysis of the words based on lists of words that we provide or you edit or overwrite that could be in any language and can be not just positive, negative, and angry. It could be economy, performance, and safety if we're talking about cars. It could be, let somebody else in. So, you're a subject matter expert for your research topic. You come up with the vocabulary lists that are relevant to your topic. And welcome. And we're talking about networks. So each of these networks, you can actually come and visit us out on the web. Let's go find here we go. If you visit us at nodexlgraphgallery.org, so nodexlgraphgallery.org, and I have a dog and he barks. So. And here you're going to find, it's sort of like Instagram for graph. So we could think of it as Instagraph. You might think, well, people are talking about Corona. What are they saying when they talk about Corona? And they might be talking about immigration and the virus. And who are the people who are at the front of talking about immigration and the virus? These are the leading voices talking about immigrants and the virus. And these are the leading URLs. And these are the leading hashtags.
Whoa.
And word pairs and URLs and domains. And so by looking at the hashtags being used, could we figure out, is this group sort of pro-immigrant or anti-immigrant? Is this for it or against it, whatever the policy may be? Well, yes, because, well, there's a sociological concept. We started with a flock of birds, right? And the idea is homophily. Anybody familiar with the concept of homophily? It is known perhaps better by the phrase, birds of a feather flock together, which is to say that people who agree tend to interact and people who disagree do not interact. And that means that each of these clusters is more than just a social cluster, it's an ideological one. And you'll also notice that most of them are just these wagon wheels. It's just somebody in the middle, big set of people retweeting them. Someone in the middle, big set of people retweeting them. Someone in the middle, over here, same thing. And so this wagon wheel structure is an important structure. It is the structure of audience. We're going to get to that because let me show you this. If you Google up Pew Internet, NodeXL, that's PEW, internet.org, and then NodeXL, you'll end up with this, Mapping Twitter Topic Networks. And in this report, we show that there are these 6 basic structures or shapes in social media, at least in Twitter social media. It is found elsewhere, not everywhere. So for example, you will not find these shapes in Wikipedia networks, but you do find them in email networks and in web board networks and in text message networks and certainly in Twitter. And these are the patterns of first polarized, 2 groups of people who won't talk to each other, unified or community. Oh yeah, I see a question from Garrett. And Garrett, you want to unmute and chime on in there? Go ahead.
Just kind of like talking about the ideological clusters. It seems you mentioned that they're clustered, so in a sense they're siloed. If I'm understanding correct.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
It's kind of interesting because, you know, I do pay attention to political Twitter. I mean, I think it's hard to not pay attention to it. And I always peruse comment sections. And the one thing that I do notice, whether it's Biden tweeting or Trump tweeting or whatever, you always have like the extreme polar opposites commenting on that. So like I would be curious to see, like, one, if they are siloed, how are they still piggybacking off of that in a sense, you know, because in a sense they're in their own little networks.
Right, so let's see if I can find you a good example. I've got an idea, yeah. So you've heard of the anti-vaxxers? Perhaps, I'll just take that as a yes. So people who are, yeah, oh, I see a thumbs up, that's cool. So here's an example of doctors have decided that the anti-vaxxers are dangerous. They disagree, they're doctors, they're pediatricians, and they went to medical school and they know that vaccines are safe and effective. This is a reality. This is almost like saying the sun rises in the east and the earth revolves around the sun and vaccines are safe and effective. And you know, I don't know if you want to argue with me, that's fine. But, you know, I believe scientifically, there's no more true medical statement than vaccines are safe and effective and have dramatically changed the life expectancy of humans. So doctors have decided, I'm coming in back in there and I'm going to tell you guys, and they have this hashtag called Doctors Speak Up, and they come in to start give the anti-vaxxers some direct tough love. They're going to tell you, you know, no, it works. And what we found is the anti-vaxxers held their own, and we can illustrate this by looking at the #1 URL related to that hashtag was actually critical of vaccines. And so what I'm trying to suggest is that each of these little clusters forms a group of people who mostly agree with themselves, even though they may disagree with some other group. And those people clump together talking to each other about how much they dislike the other group. At least that's what we observe. And so, yes, they may be talking about a similar thing, but they actually talk to each other more. And the algorithm therefore puts them into their own little cluster.
Got it.
Does that address your point?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. And so these are, I would argue, homophilous ideological clusters. People are choosing who to retweet and reply to, and that's pulling them into one cluster or another. And then we can identify the clusters in some ways by saying, well, the name of the cluster is equal to the 10 hashtags used most frequently. And if we now go through this, I bet we're going to be able to find the ones that are like, we disagree with you. You know? And so they're going to be the ones about autism. They're going to be the ones talking about safety. They're the ones who say, you know, oh, it's actually dangerous. You don't know. There's mercury in it. There's stuff in there. So the hope is that this is a tool that would enable many kinds of research, because most topics that are interesting are controversial. They involve groups of people who disagree over the facts of reality, clashing in some way, not necessarily directly interacting, but clashing in the sense that they're building their own narratives. And we can see those narratives generate friction with one another in places like social media. And our goal is to make it so that you can actually visualize that conflict. If these were like satellite photographs of tank battles, that would be a metaphor. If it was radar for incoming hostile air forces, that's a metaphor. A less military metaphor might be that these are kind of marketplaces of ideas, and that we seek to generate a kind of accounting software for marketplaces of ideas. And so imagine if you wanted to invest in a market and there was no accounting software, then what would you expect? I think that's a critical question. The answer is rampant fraud. And so what do we expect in social media when we have a marketplace of ideas and there is no accounting software? Rampant fraud. And so how would we, given that we can't actually determine truth and falsity of pretty much anything, because we just don't know. And I'll give you an example. 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, hydroxychloroquine. Is it a cure or not? Don't know. Don't know. But today, 6 weeks later, hydroxychloroquine, is it a cure or not? No. In fact, the nation of France has banned the administration of hydroxychloroquine to all French citizens because it's killing people. And so now we know. But does everybody agree with that? No, no. So this is a kind of wave front of reality propagating backwards through the minds of the planet, where most of the time we really don't know. And in the conditions of uncertainty, then assertions take the fore. and people just assert things. And then truth tends to lag. It took 6 weeks, 8 weeks later till we actually got some scientific data. Like we tried it, didn't work. And you know, you might ask yourself, if it was so great, how come 100,000 people died? So these are the kinds of ideas that we're trying to explore. How does this conflict over reality actually get played out at the level of an individual tweet, message, post, update, edit, and how could we represent that as a network? And in doing so, actually get some insight into who says what to who are the leading people, what are the divisions, who are the leaders, what are the concepts. So with that, I don't know what our time frame was supposed to be. I forget, are we on for the hour? Is that correct? I think perhaps now is a very good time to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, please.
This is Zach. I'll start my video so you can see me. Yeah, so this is, I don't know if I didn't catch this before. You can get URLs from Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the other platforms, or is it just searching through Twitter?
It's Twitter, YouTube, Flickr, wikis, blogs, stuff that comes in from GraphML, Payek, and Gephi, UCINet, and then any network data set you happen to have from other places.
Okay.
And that includes SQL servers.
Oh, awesome.
So I guess the picture I would want to show you is this. Here. A network is born whenever two globally unique identifiers are joined. And when I say the word joined, I'm talking like database joined, right? And so this is what we call an edge. One edge represents the connection, one connection between two entities. And so this represents the idea that A is related to B. And if we wanted to, we could also represent the opposite, which is B is related to A backwards. And under certain circumstances, they're actually mutually connected. And so the way to represent that is one row, one connection, person one, person two, could be company one, company two, bank account one, bank account two, it could be phone number one, calls phone number two, email address, replies to email address number two. And then you could have what we would refer to as metadata. Metadata would be, okay, I called you, so I have phone number one, phone number two. What would the metadata for a phone call be? What time? What duration? So, yeah, I mean, maybe start time, end time, and then we calculate duration. So now we have a start time, an end time, and a duration. And the start time and the end time could allow us to lay out all the calls on a grid so that we could see who calls who when. Maybe there's time of day patterns in there. So metadata about the edge is important, but what would metadata about the vertex be? Well, maybe it's a mobile phone. We actually have a latitude and longitude for you. And that's the attribute of you, but not of the other guy or gal, you know. She's not where you are, otherwise why'd you call? Because you can't find her phone, that's why. So metadata about the people or the entities. Another way to think about that is these are nouns, this is a verb. These are adjectives and adverbs. So here's what it would look like in a spreadsheet. Thing one, thing two, what was the connection? When was the connection? Here's the actual text. Did it have hashtags? Did it have URLs? This is how you might get the data in from Twitter, or you might actually write it out yourself, because what I could show you is that this does not have to be social media at all. It could be a very excitable terrier. Let's do 6 degrees of Alexander the Great. And what you end up with is, you know, I guess I would like to rotate but I can't rotate that easily. So these are the figures from a paper by Dr. Diane Klein, and she uses NodeXL to explore the network of Alexander the Great. And as she likes to say, Alexander did not have a Facebook page. He was more of an Instagram guy. But he did have a network. And that network was expressed in ancient Greek writings when somebody would say, Alexander sent horses to Philip. And so we get Alexander, comma, Philip, comma, sent horses, and then comma, what page, what book, what line? Where's the original ancient Greek? And then you get these things. And so this guy tortured this guy arrested that guy, this is the father of that guy, this guy put this guy on trial, this guy ordered to carry out sentence to that guy. And, you know, this is a way of looking at the relationships in ancient history. They never saw this before. Historians didn't do this before. And the reason is because historians learn ancient Greek and therefore don't also learn Python. And the two things are hard to learn in the same lifetime. We're only human. And so if we could take what Python could do for you and stick it into Excel and make it so that you could just make a spreadsheet, press a button, and you get that. What happens next is, yeah, let's see. So her husband is Eric Klein, and Eric does, he says she's the modernist. He does the 1,000 years earlier, it's the clay tablets, right? And so he's got basically who sent horses to who sent whose daughter to marry what other king. And this is all because they're able to now use NodeXL to map relationships in the ancient world using these clay tablets. There are 23,000 of the clay tablets left on Earth, and they were all translated to English, and they're called the Amarna collection. And those were run through NodeXL. And you kind of get these networks of the ancient world that nobody had otherwise ever seen. So what this means is that if you can answer these questions, who did what with whom, when and where, then you get to write it as a row, and you stick the right things in the right place. The who did what with whom gets scrunched down over there. And then these would be the attributes of the edge, and then you would also have vertex attributes. The end result is that you end up seeing patterns like this. And once you're sensitized to these patterns, you can come back to the NodeXL graph gallery, and when we load the page and go, oh, well, this is people talking about the accounting company Accenture. Who are the most important people? These are the most important people. What are they talking about? What are the other hashtags that they talk about? Could we map some of those things? Could we go and find out, oh, well, what's this blockchain thing? Who is the mayor of blockchain? We could find a map of blockchain and pretty quickly, here we go, discover who is the mayor of blockchain. And these are these cryptocurrency people. And what is the most important URL for blockchain people? There you go. This is a lot easier, I would argue, than trying to read a few thousand Bitcoin or blockchain tweets, trying to figure this all out. That's like looking at those grids of numbers, trying to figure out where's the outlier, where's the error, when in fact, what you really needed was something that your brain can digest. I feel sorry for our brains. We keep asking them to do things like, you know, it'd be like asking fish to, you know, ride a bicycle. That's not what they do. But, you know, if you ask it to swim, fish do that really good. If you let brains recognize patterns, give them patterns to recognize, right? So there you go. Let me jump into it here, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
I have a quick question. Are you able to identify or make an estimate or guess of any trolls or bots that come?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah. Bot detection is definitely a thing, and the bots tend to be in clusters. They tend to talk to each other. Well, and I should say there are simple bots, more sophisticated bots, very sophisticated bots, and then crossing the whole thing, there are things that I would call cyborgs. Okay, so there are, which is to say there are many non-human actors in this social space mixing with humans. Not all of them are intentionally hostile. So there are many content retweet bots that call themselves bot, identify themselves as bot, and are considered to be like, there is something called the big data retweet bot. It's considered to be useful. Then there are these things, cyborgs, where essentially a cyborg is, it's half machine, half you. Like you download your candidate's app and it says, do you mind if I tweet all the people in your address book? And you go, no, go right ahead. So is that you or is that it? Well, that's both of you. So you're a cyborg, you're not just a bot. And of course, bots have bot handlers, right? I mean, bots aren't, at the moment that I'm aware of, completely spawning themselves ex nihilo into the universe. So, you know, there are some humans involved. But I think your question is, can we spot some of the cruder forms of inauthentic behavior? And the answer is yes. The further question, though, for you, I think would be, is that sufficient? And that the answer is probably no.
Can you tell any kind of location or
Oh, yeah.
region?
Yeah,
Just-
so let me show you what that looks like. So we promised some Power BI, and here. How many people here, oh, wrong one. How many people have heard of Tableau? Tableau, any Tableau users? All right, and then the related question is whether or not you've heard of Power BI. And Power BI is essentially MS Tableau. That's somewhat not that charitable a name for it, but it's basically the Microsoft version of Tableau. And I spent 10 years at Microsoft, and my NodeXL is built into Excel, and so it was a natural fit for us to think, how could we use this next generation data analysis tool, Power BI, and the new Power Tools platform from Microsoft to get more value out of the insights in a NodeXL workbook? And so unless you are already a very Excel savvy user, when we deliver a workbook to you, and you know, they're basically workbooks that kind of look like this. There's a whole bunch of data and it's on a lot of worksheets. And if you know what you're doing, you can get a lot of value out of this. But a lot of our users don't really know what they're doing with Excel even. And so we've built this. And this takes the workbook that we've generated from NodeXL and absorbs it and creates a web-based, we're in a browser, we're in Chrome, works on a Mac, works on a tablet, works on an iPad, might work on your watch, depends on your watch, certainly works on your desktop. And why is this different from just looking at like a slide? Why is this not the same as just looking at some PowerPoint? Well, now everything is clickable. Like over here, we have a little, this is called a tree map, and this is sort of like a squared pie chart. And it's telling us things like, these are the people who used an iPhone, these are the people who used Android, to talk about motor trend. Is there a difference? Well, let's click. If I click on Android, everything else on the screen is now going to change. It's only going to show me the results for people who used Android to tweet. And that means that what they linked to just changed. What words they used just changed. Who the important people are just changed. What languages were spoken, what kinds of tweets were made, and who was verified and who isn't. And so we could also say, oh, well, it's not just that I want them on Android. I only want to see the verified, you know, the people with blue checks, the fancy people. And that brings it down to just one person. It's Motor Trend. They do it themselves. We could also look at this in other facets. We can look at it over time, for example, and we could see that, let's see, this would probably be a later date to zoom in. Let's try that. And so all of these different configurators let us slice and dice our way into the data. And there we can see a little closer view of it. Here we're going to see what it looks like when we plot it on a map. And so we're going to load a Bing map and throw the description of the location that people can write where they're located. We're going to have to take them at their word. Some of them say they're on Mars. So not all of them were accurately located. So here, for example, around the world, motor trend location. But some people say Springfield, Oregon. And so for these people, we put them where they belong. And for these people, we don't put them anywhere. We just don't put a dot there. And so this allows us to see that, oh, basically there's a kind of English speaking and North American focus. You can zoom in on North America and see what parts of the country are tweeting about motor trend. And you could even drill down into an individual. You could find out who that is, where that is. So we're trying to deliver the tools that would allow an analyst to look at a collection of tweets or a collection of YouTube videos or a collection of Flickr photos or a collection of data authored by a bunch of people, annotated in a lot of ways. And can we slice and dice it so as to remove essentially the essence of it rather than reading 1,856 tweets, which at the rate of 600 tweets per hour is still a 4-hour commitment. And I guess my challenge to the humans who are listening, what do you know at the end of those 4 hours? And so we don't want to actually suggest don't read the messages. We're not saying that. What we want to say is read the messages that come up as meaningful, like, well, motor trend is clearly important, but who is this other person and what are their messages? And what were the, this thing got favorited 500 times. That's more interesting. So have a motivated way of consuming the content rather than just taking it in the order it came. Because if you do that, I believe humans just can't keep up with the volume. And so anybody remember the story of John Henry? Anybody heard the story of John Henry? That's this story about a man who fights a machine. He's going to chip away at a coal mine, and they bring in a machine, and he beats the machine, but then he has a coronary because they didn't provide healthcare back then, and we don't really want to do that. We don't want to be John Henry. We want to be the guy who rides the machine, right? Don't kill yourself fighting the machines. Make the machines work for us. That's our sort of design philosophy. So this, I hope, will give you a little taste of how we're trying to direct the application. I'm hoping that you'll visit us over at NodeXL Graph Gallery, and you'll see that there's a lot of tutorials that are available to guide you in how to automate NodeXL, how to do network and content analysis, do semantic network analysis. And if you have data from other sources, we can now import your tweet ID list. So maybe you've been collecting tweets, but you don't know how to do this to it. If you just take out the IDs and drop them into NodeXL, it'll go and build you one of these networks pretty automatically. So let me pause again, see if there are questions, comments, queries, concerns.
Just real quick. Can NodeXL identify which accounts are associated to like a TweetDeck account?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so let's see if I can find you the source column. Just a moment. we go with their source. So this column is I'm going to say the word JSON at you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, JSON. So
JSON.
so do you know what that means?
Oh.
No. Okay, that's okay.
Nah.
Okay, so that
I think it's a programming language.
It's a data representation format.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
yeah.
the Java serialized object notation format.
Got it.
And basically, it's just a bunch of punctuation marks that say, this is a key, this is a value, this is a key, this is a value. And we get a key called source. And in that value, these are the things that can show up. And I don't know if you can see this that well. Let me make that longer. Okay, so these are all the values that came back. And that's 35 XBot, APPHI, buffer. I'm just going down the list here. Here's Hootsuite, if then that, Nuzzle, Octopost, Social Flow, Tweetbot for iOS, for Mac, Tweetcaster, Twitter for Android, Twitter iPad, Twitter iPhone. So yeah, all of these are, and this is all just for people who recently tweeted about the word alternative credit. So these are all the different ways that they injected their tweet into the network. Does that address your question?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different options to say the least. Follow-up question to that is, I mean, I know about NodeXL. I didn't have the technical savviness to operate it like someone who is familiar with it. Thank God Diana Asher helped me out in helped me out in my project with it. However, are you gonna is NodeXL gonna eventually have a program that's compatible with Mac OS, or is it still only Windows OS dependent?
Yeah, we are going to offer NodeXL Cloud and enable Mac users to use a virtual machine.
Got it.
But the idea of a native Mac version of NodeXL, sadly, is not in budget. We just, it's a technically very challenging thing. It basically has to be written from the ground up. And then worse than that, you then have to coordinate the two versions.
Got it.
And so I know it's not a popular message to be saying this about MacBook users, but your days are numbered.
Oh, wow.
You know, the iPad is going to replace the MacBook.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways already has. The iPad Pro is basically a MacBook replacement. So, you know, Windows is in your future, whether you like it or not in some ways.
I could tentatively agree to that. I saw the direction you're going already, you know, teaching NodeXL, because a lot of the functions it seems like it's very specific to a certain user, you know, like in terms of like definitions and categories and stuff like that. So maybe a little foreign for someone like me. Would your tutorials be able to get me up and running?
And you know, if you want to book, you know, an intro hour, we'll do that with students. I strongly recommend Googling NodeXL Pro Quick Start Guide, because you might be really surprised. You know, depending on what data you want in and out of NodeXL, we have these things called recipes. And it may be that we've got, for example, a Twitter data recipe, a YouTube recipe, a Flickr data. We'll have a wiki one here soon. And if that's what you wanted, you're going to get this result. And with fewer clicks than you think.
Awesome.
Yeah, so this video, 4 minutes, 33 seconds, I believe, well worth dialing, 434. Yeah, so this is really, it's easier than you think. Yeah, I mean, the walkthrough is you go open NodeXL, you go to the web, you download one of these recipes, you go back into NodeXL, and there's a place in the menu that says, where are my options? Import new options. You find that file, and then you go to automate and hit run. You go get a cup of coffee, come back, and when it's done, all the data has been analyzed, and you get one of these on the side.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
so,
you, sir.
and so, if this is a method that you're thinking about using, and is this like a master's project or a PhD project?
I'm gonna get creative. It would definitely be for. I would use it in some regard for like my portfolio presentation next year.
Okay, well, so we support students, and if that was something that you wanted to do, depending on your topic, it doesn't have to be social media. I could show you, for example, Diane Klein's graduate student, Daniel Howlett, historian, also using not internet data. These networks are generated from historical records of who said who was a witch in Salem. Remember the witch trials? And so this is just another illustration of using NodeXL where the data has zero to do with the internet.
Got it.
And so, she's a witch burner. So if she floats, then Anyway,
would I reach out to you or just one of the crew members?
Oh yeah. Send it to info at SMR Foundation, and depending on your time zone, you'd probably be mine. Yeah. So you would meet me, and we would, I guess we have a few minutes. Tell me about your data. What kind of data are you interested in?
Specifically, mobile money.
Mobile money. All right.
Mobile money is primarily used through text messages. Right now, the relevancy would be in Africa, but it seems like it's exploding in other regions as well, specifically Southeast Asia.
And what about my teenage daughter? Does Venmo count?
I think it would count in a sense, but like from a first world perspective, the mobile money I would be referencing is like, I think for like your daughter in a sense, like she uses Venmo, Apple Pay, PayPal, etc. Right?
Right.
Those
so
are
you're thinking about like M-Pesa.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, here I would say then that is fintech. Would that be fair? We would call that fintech.
Yes, agreed.
And then would it be useful for you to know who are the 10 thought leaders in fintech in Twitter?
Yeah, definitely.
And then there they are. These are the 10 most influential voices about fintech in Twitter. These are the 10 most important URLs. And then, of course, we break out those URLs for each of the subgroupings. And the idea would be if you want to achieve any goal in fintech, you probably should hit the follow button on all of these people. And at a certain point, you probably want to start to engage them. And if you're going to talk to Enrico Molinari, you probably should use the hashtag customer experience and IoT. How do we know that? Well, we analyzed all of his messages and figured out what words and hashtags does he use more than anybody else.
Oh, this is very cool.
And so the idea is, well, we are trying to save you from reading 1,597 tweets, which again, that's almost a 4-hour commitment. And then what, right? And 4 hours at the end of which a lot of coffee's been drunk and maybe some yellow pads have been scrawled with usernames and hashtags. Maybe there's a lot of hash, marking as you go through and go, oh, there's another one of those. But would you get this kind of commanding heights view of talking about, if not the word mobile money, and then, by the way, we can certainly go straight to the source. We can say, let's go to NodeXL, go to import, go to the Twitter search network. We're going to search Twitter for tweets and type in mobile money. And we're now going and getting tweets. We've just gotten 1,000 tweets. We will get no more than 18,000 tweets. So it's going to go as high as 180 pages. You may see at the bottom it's saying getting page 35, 36, 38. And when that happens at the end, eventually it's going to sort of disgorge about 18,000 tweets or thereabouts. And then NodeXL is going to do its thing. and maybe 8, 10 minutes from now, 15 minutes from now, it's going to publish to the graph gallery the mobile money map. And I'll be able to answer the question, who's the mayor of mobile money? Just like that. And
Got it.
instead of spending hours and then never being able to do it 10 times in a row, you do this 96 times, well, let's see, 94 times a day on a single laptop. Because you do it every 15 minutes. You get 24 hours, you can do it about 96 times a day. So the goal is, why take a sketch of a forest by looking at each leaf when you could put a drone in the air and take a picture of the whole thing?
This is cool.
Yeah, so that's our goal. What you're seeing is it's now ingesting 12,000 mobile money tweets, and it will take, it could take 10 minutes to digest it and turn it into that network that you see similar to this. But I hope later in the afternoon, you'll return to NodeXL Graph Gallery and pick up your map.
Will do. Would it be cool to reach out to you for further questions if we had them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm Marc at smrfoundation.org. And you can find us here at smrfoundation.org.
Awesome.
And our goal is to facilitate research into social media and into social networks. And I guess the other place I would use to sort of brag is if you go to Google Scholar, and this is the number that we check about once a month. So we are looking for the papers that have come out. So in 6 months, we've got 260 papers. Over the last several years, it's now 8,000 papers, which we hope probably wouldn't have existed if it were not for the existence of NodeXL to help people get where they're going in getting that data. Maxwell, are there any questions on your part?
Yeah, actually, you must have seen it on my face, but thank you. And I apologize that I started a little late, so I may have missed a little bit.
I think it got recorded. You can watch it later.
Great. I had a question just regarding, I was looking at the Salem project that you had just brought up using
right.
analysis of historical data.
Yeah.
Using NodeXL to get at social media, if we're looking at historical data, what sort of repositories were used in that project? Just out of curiosity.
It was Salem Social Network.org. Salem Networks there, okay. He used court documents. It was the transcripts of the court cases. And so he annotated all of these courthouse records. He went to Salem, he sat in the courthouse library. He went back 400 years, 300 years, and 1692-93. He says here, the master network, a graph showing all the interactions in the 1692-93 court records. The Newton network, a graph of 8 case files in the spectral network of the specters that appeared together during the trial. So this is, the ghosts appeared at the trials. It's pretty freaky stuff. Remember that America was founded by religious zealots that were thrown out of every other country on earth. God bless us all. So I think this is answering your question, that it's the original source materials. And he extracts edges from that. He can actually read that and go, oh, look, this is somebody doing something with a somebody, and it happened on this page or on this document in this line. Does that answer your question?
Definitely. I'm just seeing, I just got out of another course on indigenous librarianship and thinking how a tool like this can help connect a community that is decentralized and kind of like get the narrative of, like discussed, like what issues are really relevant. Yeah, I think this is a really exciting set of tools for multiple applications within our field.
So what we've talked about so far are social networks, but now that you're talking about culture, let me just add to the idea pot, the idea of a semantic network. And that just means words or concepts or phrases and the ways that those words connect to each other. And so here, this is people talking about the climate debate, and these are the words that co-occur, not the people and their connections. And so this page here is the tutorial on how would you bring in a text? What if you have a novel? Can NodeXL create a novel network? Yeah. You know, if it's an e-text, put each sentence on a line and it will analyze the word pairs, which words go next to each other. And it will create a network for you. And so take a look at the words and word pairs spreadsheets. This is the word and word pairs dialog. And so just following along on this website, I think will get you to perhaps a way of extracting the networks of concepts from within cultural artifacts.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you for the interest. And it's a very good point. It's not just social media networks, it's social networks. And it's not just social networks, it's networks. And once you look around and see how many networks there are in the world around you, it's kind of scary because it's like, wow, I wasn't noticing them before and now they're everywhere. You know, financial networks, social networks, kin networks, trade networks, and of course our favorite network right now, the who infected who network. That's a scary network because once you look at COVID from a network perspective, what we want to do is break the transmission chains. And maybe we shouldn't talk about this because it gets me upset. But there's a network way of looking at the transmission of ideas or viruses. The same models work. And so when we used to say, oh, what I want to do is make this thing go viral, we didn't mean COVID. Yeah, so it just highlights the idea that the question, where is the best point in the network, can't be answered because it depends on what's going through the network. If opportunity and money are going through the network, then I'll be in the middle, thank you. And if it's Corona, I'd like to be at the very edge. I'd like to be isolated. I'd like to be disconnected from the network. And so if you look at like the history of the Black Death, there are reasons why like Ireland kept all of its libraries and most of its people because it was so far away from everything else. You know, the Black Death didn't kind of make it as far. So the edges of networks are places where things survive the calamities that befall the center of networks. Okay.
Mark, this has just been fantastic. I've been getting a lot of back channeling. Thank you for the invite. This has been great. I want to learn more text messages. So I'd love to invite you back again to share new things.
I have a suggestion that we do a kind of masterclass that perhaps people would be interested in signing up, bringing their data to the session and allowing others to see how we would engage with your data and eventually generate a network of this sort, which we hope will be the analytic artifact around which you would then build a narrative and a text, you know, for a peer-reviewed publication. To add yours to that list that I just showed you.
Fantastic. I just want to say thank you so much. We will make this recording available to the participants, and so many messages saying I have so many ideas for how to use this. So I'm so pleased that you were able to share this with everyone today and that we now have a license for this in the IS lab. So if anyone wants to test it out and figure out how to use it for your own projects, hit me up, hit up one of the IS lab staff members, and we will get you started. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you. Bye all. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Hope to hear from you. Take care.